So this video is going to walk you through how to do steps 3, 4, and 5, the green, purple, and blue stickies at the top of your Padlet. Once you've got those done, you should have a thesis, and then you're actually ready to start writing your analysis. The best way to use this video, I think, is to watch each section, and then when I say pause and go do something, pause the video and go do that, and then come back to this. Ask if you have any questions about that step. Call me over and ask for help. But don't watch this video all the way through. I think you will just get really bored. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is to review your step 1. Step 1 is this white sticky. You should have written this on your board last week after you got your topic approved. If you haven't done that yet, get out your yellow topic brainstorm packet and type up a sticky that has that last thing from your topic brainstorm packet. What is your topic? Okay, so my topic was, I'm fascinated by the connections between propaganda and indoctrination, how these are similar and different. In particular, I want to explore how propaganda, long-term, becomes indoctrination, and I am curious about whether people are able to question or resist propaganda, and whether they are able to question or resist indoctrination. Okay, pause this video, go reread your topic now. If you don't have a white topic idea posted on your Padlet, create one based on your yellow topic brainstorm packet. Okay, you're back. So you've seen your topic idea. Now you're going to review the evidence that you have gathered. You can see down here, I chose 6 stickies. I only have one yellow one from history, so I'm going to have to use that one in my paper. I have 5 that are from English. I've got 3 propaganda quotes and 3 indoctrination quotes. What I'd like you to do now is to reread each of your pieces of evidence and change the title by double-clicking it and changing this part up here to give the gist or what you wanted to get out of that evidence. Why did you choose that evidence? Why did it feel interesting to you? So for example, this one, my first one, it says an hour of weekly state mandated patriotic education called Talks About Important Things, which makes me laugh, is another wartime novelty. To open the school year, Putin held a session via Video Friday, telling students that Russia was just as invincible now as it was during World War II. Okay, so I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this to propaganda, and the point here is that Putin is video conferencing directly with students to try to improve Russia's image. Okay, so now I've updated it. So I'm keeping propaganda, so I know what that was, but I've added this title that kind of gives the gist of my quote or what stood out to me. I'll do one more. This quote from Jun Sung this is the quote about looking in the mirror for the first time in your life and realizing that you are unattractive. What I really liked about this quote is that it shows how Jun Sung kind of knew that things were bad but didn't realize they were that bad. And then at the end, it says he didn't know whether he could trust these. He says, surely South Korean news reports were exaggerated just like North Korean propaganda. So what I'm going to put here is propaganda. Jun Sung didn't know if he could even trust the information he got from South Korean news. He was so used to getting twisted information from North Korea. Okay, you need to go do the same thing. Go look at your pieces of evidence. For each piece of evidence, read the evidence over, review context if you need to, and change the title of each of your pieces of evidence to capture the gist or what you thought was interesting about each piece of evidence. Go do that, and when you've done that, come back to this video. Okay, so now you should be done with step 2, reviewing your evidence and changing all the titles of your evidence. You can see that each of my stickies now has a longer title where I've added what stood out to me about my evidence, just as a tool for myself. So now, to get ready for step 3, I'm going to move my stickies around, and I want you to group evidence that seems to fit together. So in mine, I've got this video about this thing about Putin's video talking directly to students, and it's just trying to change the image. That seems to go well with this one from 1984, where the telescreens are telling Winston and other people statistics about how well they're doing to try to make Oceania look good. Those feel like they go together. I've got this one about Jun Sung kind of wondering about whether he should trust or not. And then this one from Harrison Bergeron, where George is kind of smart and he kind of wonders about things, but he seems to have bought into this idea that what they have is better now and that the Dark Ages were bad. So here I kind of see two people who have a little bit of doubt, but also have kind of bought into the system. They're kind of straddling. Junsung has more doubt than George does. And then here, these two seem like they go together because they both have to do with not thinking. This one from 1984 has to do with the Parsons children not thinking and channeling all of their anger externally. And this one is a great quote just about unconsciousness, that you just stop thinking at some point. Actually, as I look at this, I'm starting to realize that this one doesn't really show doubt. George is not a true believer, but he doesn't doubt the policies. This has to do with not doubting. This has to do with not doubting. So I've got two that deal with the messaging that are sent out. Here's somebody receiving the messaging and kind of doubting, kind of not doubting. And then three that I have together that all have to do with the end of this, pure indoctrination, where people stop doubting, stop asking questions. Okay, I've got three clear categories for my evidence, so now I think I'm ready to do step 3. Go ahead and go sort your evidence, cluster it together the way I have done, and then come back and we'll do step 3 together. Okay, you're back. So you've moved your stickies together. You should have an idea about why you sorted it the way you did. The good news is step 3 is just explaining that. So it says to create a green sticky note. No problem. Here I go. And I'm going to call this connections. I'm going to make it be green. Okay, so here's my green sticky note for connections. So I need to choose at least 3 of the questions below. We are requiring you to do the first 2. I want you to talk about which pieces of evidence are very similar and which ones are outliers or seem different from the others. And then I'm going to ask you to choose one of the remaining questions to answer. So you must answer questions 1 and 2 and then your choice of one more. Okay, here we go. I'm going to do questions 1 and 2 right now. So question 1, which piece of evidence are very similar? Well, my first 2, my 2 propaganda Okay, the first thing that I'd like you to do is to answer questions 1 and 2, which pieces of evidence are very similar and which ones are outliers or seem different. Here's what I've written for my evidence. The first one, my 2 propaganda examples, these 2 that I grouped together, feel similar because they both deal with the government pushing positive messaging out to people through media. My 3 indoctrination examples, these 3, feel like they go together because they all show what people look like after having been exposed to propaganda for a long time. People stop doubting, accept the basic premises of the government, and even perpetuate the messages through their own actions. So these 3 kind of show what indoctrination at the end looks like. Okay, next question is which ones seem outliers? This one in the middle. This one feels like my outlier. It feels different. I wrote, one example that feels different is my quote for Junsung. He's kind of in this in-between place. On one hand, he's getting information from outside of North Korea that makes him doubt his own country's narrative. But on the other hand, he seems doubtful about how much he should trust the South Korean narrative. Is this just propaganda too? He seems to be scarred almost from being exposed to so much false information and feels like he doesn't know how to recognize the truth when he sees it. Okay, so my requirements are I need to choose 3 of the questions. I've done 1 and 2. Those are required for everybody. Last, I need to choose 1 more question to answer on my green sticky. And so I think I want to focus on question number 5, which was what I was interested in my topic anyway. What connections does my evidence show between control methods? So I'll copy that, I'll add that to my green sticky, and write my response. Okay, I've answered question 5 now. The question I chose was, what connections does your evidence show between control methods? So I wrote, my evidence shows the types of propaganda people in dictatorships are exposed to, media messages and school lessons that say the country is wonderful, strong, fair, prosperous. Jun Sung's example shows how even getting counter evidence cannot necessarily be enough to counterbalance this biased information. Jun Sung is actively seeking the truth, but still isn't sure he can trust it. And then my last group shows that eventually propaganda leads to the outcome of indoctrination. Indoctrination feels less like a control tactic than just a descriptor of someone who has lost the ability to think independently. Okay, so now I've done step 3. Go do the same thing, create a green sticky note, answer questions 1, 2, and your choice of one of the other ones, and then come back to this video. When you're ready for step 4, you are going to make your topic into a thesis statement or a question. At this point, you should be starting to see kind of an argument that you are building with the evidence that you've chosen. You had something in mind as you gathered your evidence. You had something in mind as you grouped your evidence. You should have refined that idea as you wrote your connections, and now's the time to put it into words. If you can, we suggest that you do option 1. Turn your topic into a thesis statement. And you've got 3 different options for how your thesis statement could work. It could say, one tactic connects to another tactic because. You could also talk about impact. You could say a control tactic, indoctrination, leads to some kind of impact because. So I could write something about how indoctrination leads to lack of independent thought because. Or you could do a most thesis, and that would sound like the most important tactic is blank because, or the most damaging tactic is whatever because, or if you're trying to be a dictator, the most effective tactic is blank because. So your options are a connection, blank connects to blank, cause and effect, blank leads to an impact, or a most thesis. That should cover most of what you want to say. If at this point you still are not quite sure what you want to say about your topic, you can turn it into a question, and they would sound similar. How does one tactic connect to another tactic? How does one tactic impact whatever? What is the most and why? How are blank and blank connected? However, this is going to make a much more difficult paper to write. So if you can create a thesis statement, I would strongly suggest that is what you do. That is what I am going to do for this example. So I'm creating a purple sticky note. Here's my sticky note. I'm going to call this a working thesis or a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a thesis that you're not positive is going to work yet. So it's kind of a guess. Okay, I'll make this Post-it purple. Okay, and I think that I want to write about cause and effect. So I'm going to do this one. Okay, so I've created my working thesis, which is propaganda leads to indoctrination. One thing that I'm coming to realize is that I don't think indoctrination is really a tactic. I think indoctrination is an outcome or an impact. So that's the thesis I'm making. Propaganda leads to indoctrination. That is, an unquestioning belief in the government through time, repetition, and choking out other messages. That's the thesis that I think I want to write about. Go try to do the same thing on your own Padlet now. Create a purple sticky, draft a thesis statement the best that you can. Now you're ready for step 5, which is to narrow down your evidence. You're going to have to make some tough choices. You've got more evidence than you are going to use in your paper. Your paper should have 3 or 4 pieces of evidence. 3 is the minimum required. Remember, at least 1 English, 1 history, and 1 of your choice. 4 sometimes can be helpful. You can get 1 more piece of evidence that really helps round out your argument. We'll let you make that choice about how many pieces you need, but probably no more than 4 because your paper will get a little unwieldy. So look at the evidence that you need and choose. What are you going to keep? You want to keep the evidence that best supports your thesis or question and is juicy. Juicy evidence is quotes that can be interpreted in multiple different ways or that open up inferences that you can make. Think about, is your evidence fitting together? Is it building an argument? Does it help you think of one point that leads into another point? So with that in mind, I'm going to take a hard look at my evidence and choose what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to move to the side. For me, one piece of evidence I know I'm going to keep is this middle one. I really like this piece of evidence where I can see like that he's partially indoctrinated even though he doesn't want to be. So that one feels like a must-have. So I'm definitely going to use that one. I want something at the beginning. I've got two quotes that kind of show the same thing. I think I like my 1984 example better, but I need a history piece of evidence and I don't have any other ones, so I'm definitely going to use this one. I'm going to see if I actually need this one. I'm going to move it down. Okay, so I've got this one, Putin's directly talking to students. I've got this one, Jun-sung is partly indoctrinated even though he doesn't want to be. Here, that kind of goes with George, who's indoctrinated even though he doesn't want to be. But this is more, as we said, kind of the end goal. Here, kids are fully indoctrinated. Here, people don't think anymore at all. I'm trying to decide if those feel similar or different. This one feels like they're thinking, but they're thinking back into the party and perpetuating the party. This one feels like they just stop thinking at all. And that feels like kind of two different outcomes in a way that feels interesting. So I think I might want to keep both of these. They feel like they fit together, but they're different. And then if I can only have 4 pieces of evidence maximum, I guess I'm not going to use this indoctrination George example. So I'm going to move this one down. Okay, so I'm going to end up with 4 pieces of evidence, 1 piece showing the inputs, 1 piece showing what partial indoctrination looks like, and then 2 showing what full indoctrination looks like, 1 being that you just become the party, 1 being that you just stop thinking entirely. That's my format here. Those are the 4 pieces of evidence I'm going to use. Stop and go do the same thing for you. Go narrow down your evidence, move the stuff you're not going to use out of the way, and keep the stuff that you are going to keep.